Hi everyone, welcome back to our government and politics series. Today we are going to dive into the topic of centralization and decentralization. Big ideas that affect how countries are run. We'll talk about unitary and federal systems and take a look at Papua New Guinea's provincial government system as an example. So a key part of the understanding is how democracy works. Let's explore together and make sense of how governments are organized within this idea of centralization and decentralization. Now, at the end of this video or this discussion, we try to achieve the following objectives. First, we try to highlight aspects that shape centralization and decentralization in a political system. And then we try to explain the differences between a unitary and federal system. And lastly, describe the origins and features of the provincial government systems in Papua New Guinea. Now, let's begin. First up, we've got to talk about liberalism. What is this idea of liberalism and how is it connected to this overall discussion of centralization and decentralization? Basically, liberalism, this is all to do about giving people the freedom and letting local areas to make their own decisions, as in liberal meaning itself. Take for example the European Union. It's like a big club where countries keep control over their own stuff but also work together on some things. That's decentralization in action. Now on to the opposite hand of the spectrum, which is authoritarianism. In authoritarianism, here the power is all about staying in one place to keep tight control. Think about Soviet Union back in the day. Everything was run from top down, leaving little room for local to have a say. Now, so in decentralization, you have, let's say, the example of European Union where there is control, but the other countries often, given the power to exercise freedom in terms of what they want to do. But not so in a centralization argument as in the Russian case. Next, let's look at some structural factors that affect centralization. Take for Canada, for example, they've got a federal system that works well with a diverse population. It lets places like Quebec keep their own language and culture alive, helping to ease tensions and keep everyone happy. So efficiency plays a big role too. In the United States, they've got a federal system too, but it's more about efficiency. States handle things like education and transport, making sure solutions fit local needs. Solution must fit local needs better. But then you've got places like France where everything runs from the top down. So it might be efficient, but it also quash local voices or suppress local voices. So what does all this mean? Well, it shows how different ideas, situations, and needs shape how power is spread out in a country. It's all about finding the right balance between giving people a voice and getting things done. So these two ideas here, empowerment and effectiveness. Empowerment is about giving people voices, Efficiency is about getting things done, For our example here, places like in Canada where the Quebec people, language and culture is alive, this is about empowerment. And then you have Russia where everything is controlled from top down. This is about the idea or argument of efficiency. So you can say that decentralization leads to empowerment and centralization leads to efficiency. Now, finding the balance between these two is important for us as students of politics to understand. Move on. Now, let's shift our focus to explore a different ways power can be spread out in a country. Now, let's break it down. First up, we have centralized power. Now, from our previous discussion, we know that centralized power talks about efficiency. So this is when all big decisions are made by the national government. Think of it like big boss calling all the shots from the top. Okay, let's talk about deconcentration. This is when government spreads its offices and agencies out to different places instead of keeping them all in one big city. Take the UK for example, when they've got government offices in places like Birmingham or the city of Birmingham and Manchester, and not just in London. So in this we have the concentration of offices, and then we have centralized power where we have the state controlling all the shots from the top. Now the other aspect is devolution. So devolution or devolution rather. This is like decentralization on steroids. Okay, when specific regions or nations within a country can get even more power to make their own decisions or own rules. Like in the UK, where Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have their own governments that handle some of their own affairs, separate from the big government in London. So there you have it, different ways countries spread out power, and they can spread out power through devolution, they can spread out power through decentralization, or they can spread out decentralization, they can spread power through deconcentration, okay, to spread out offices the local areas, or they can spread out power through centralized power where, let's say, the center holds the power. Depending on whichever way tends to power, it's all about finding the right balance between big decisions and what the local want or need. Now that we've got the handle of centralization and decentralization, let's zoom in on decentralized power and how it plays out in a federal system. So we're taking a closer look at decentralized power, especially in those cool federal systems. So what's a decentralized power? Well, it's like having two layers of government, each with their own jobs and power. First off, why do countries even bother with federal system? Well, think big. Countries like Australia and India are massive. Trying to run everything from one central spot would be a nightmare, so they spread out power. And next up is the issue of diversity. Countries with loads of different languages, religions and cultures like India find federalism handy. It lets them tailor how they govern to fit each region's unique vibe or uniqueness. And hey, federalism isn't just about making things easier, it's also a way to keep big government in check. So nobody wants a government that is too bossy, right? So federalism helps to address that, to keep governments in check. Now when a country decides to go federal, there are some big questions to ask, like who gets to make the rules and which government handles what. In places like the United States, both the big national government and the small state government had a say in making rules right from the start. And then there's the fun part, figuring out who's in charge of what. So in Canada, for example, the national government takes care of things like defending the country and dealing with other countries, while stuff like education and health is left up to the provinces. So there you have it, federal system in a nutshell. It's all about spreading the power to make things run smoother and suit everyone's need. Now let's look at the next section, which is the provincial government system in Papua New Guinea. And what you have here is a provincial government system timeline. In our short history, we started by in 1973, the CPC, the Constitutional Planning Committee, opted for a decentralized government. Okay, this in response or reaction to the colonial rule, which is centralized, and recently in Parliament they have been talking about this idea of provinces or provincial government have been talking about the idea of breaking away or sharing of power. So in 1973, the CPC opted to have a decentralized system, not the one that is under the colonial administration, which is a centralized colonial rule. So by 1975, okay, there were breakdown of talks to this idea of decentralization system. This is due to the Bougainville secessionist movement. Okay, Somare created a unitary system with the ultimate power in the state as a result of that. By 1976, Bougainville leaders accepted the integration with condition, and that led to the establishment of the 1976 OLPG, or Organic Law on Provincial and Local Government. Now, Somare's vision and the leader's vision was to have a government, a decentralization system that will empower the diverse culture and geography Papua New Guinea has. But over time, this is not so smooth. Okay, now to the issue of provincial system. Now in this section here, let's zoom into Papua New Guinea's journey with provincial government system and introduction of district development authorities. Now, in the previous section or lecture slide, we've talked about the timeline, and I've only introduced 1973, 1975, and 1976. Now, let's move the discussion forward. So, we're taking a closer look at how things are shaking up in Papua New Guinea when it comes to provincial governance and local development. Back in 1976, Papua New Guinea set up provincial governments with elected parliaments and leaders. Sounds good, right? But over time, they hit some bumps in the road. People weren't too keen on the setup, and there were some issues with how things were run. And these issues were mainly due to poor performance and mismanagement in provincial governments. So by 1995, they hit the reset button. The parliament or the legislature and the government hit the reset button with a new law called the Organic Law on the Provincial Governments and Local Governments, or the OLP-LLG, the Organic Law on the Provincial Government and the Local Level Government. And now, in this law, they're trying to attach another layer of government, which is the local government, into the provincial government system. So, out with the old, in with the new. They scraped the old system and made some big changes, like getting rid of directly elected parliaments and switching to indirectly elected bodies. Now, this is a new ball game. Now, let me repeat that. They get rid of the directly elected parliaments, which was the vision of our leaders to empower our people, so they can have a directly elected in the provinces. Okay, and switching on to indirectly elected bodies. Now, you may say one thing, this is a discussion, and we talked about the idea of empowerment versus efficiency. You can say the 1995 reform is an act of the central government trying to claim the powers back as a result of mismanagement and poor leadership. So mismanagement and poor performance is an argument of efficiency over empowerment. So, but that didn't stop there. Okay, they want to make sure everyone had a say. So they brought in the folks from the local government, women, traditional leaders, and other important voices to help run the show at the provincial level. However, remember, those that they brought in were not elected, but indirectly elected or appointed. Now fast forward to 2014 and enter the District Development Authority, or the DDA for short. Now these bad boys were set up by the national government to give districts more power to make decisions and get stuff done locally. So each DDA is like a little powerhouse, planning and making things happen right in their own backyard. So this is the argument of efficiency, if you have followed through the video, and I've stated this in the video. So there you have it. Papua New Guinea's journey with provincial governance and the rise of District Development Authority. It's all about giving back, or trying to, or under the impression of giving back to the people and getting things done where it matters. However, we have seen a shift from the empowerment argument to the efficiency argument. Now, in conclusion, so we have been talking about different things like history, size, diversity, and money can affect how much power is kept in one place. So if a country has always been run by big bosses at the top, chances are they'll stick with that setup. And hey, if you're trying to run a massive country with tons of different regions, languages, tribes, it's going to be tough to spread the power out evenly. So by speaking of spreading that power, let's chat about federal system. Okay, there are some packs like giving regions more say in how things are run and stopping the big bosses from getting too bossy. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes coordinating between all these different levels of government can be a real headache. So in Papua New Guinea, okay, they've been making some big changes to how they run things at the provincial level. It's all about listening to more voices and making sure everyone gets a seat at the table. Plus, they're trying to get or find that sweet spot between keeping things centralized and giving local areas more power to do their own thing. So there you have it, the ins and outs of governance and how it's all playing out in Papua New Guinea. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more videos like this. See you next time.